Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining this September CE2 Charlottesville Entrepreneurs and Espresso. And welcome those of you guys that are coming back for another event. And then those of you guys that are for the very first time. Hopefully you get a lot out of today's event and you tell your friends for next time. I'll talk at the end about, we're talking about going in person. Would love to get feedback on if you feel like if this was in person, you would come in person. But this event started back in 2015. And so what is that? 5-6 years running strong. Even through the pandemic, we were able to keep it going, hence this virtual event, but we actually used to be in person. So prior to let's see, I think we had skipped April 2020, but other than that, we've been, or maybe it was March, but regardless, we've been live and not missed any. So what we do each month is we feature two speakers. We feature an early stage entrepreneur to share about their company, and then they have an ask for the audience. And so this is the reason we do this on Zoom and not webinar, is because it's participation. So we will help that entrepreneur with a barrier to growth or solving a problem that they have. And then after that, we have a what's called a crash and learn speaker. So we get a more seasoned entrepreneur, 15, 20 year plus entrepreneur, to share their water cooler stories, their crash and learn stories, the things that they've learned the hard way, and just have found that despite your industry, you always learn something. And it's very inspiring and kind of takes a little bit of the shininess out of entrepreneurship, but at the same time, really, it tells you what's real about it, but how you can really land on your feet and the difference that you can make. So pretty awesome. And this event is put on by a number of organizations here in Charlottesville. I'm on the board of CBIC, Charlottesville Business Innovation Council, and also have volunteered in the past and a big advocate of CIC, the Community Investment Collaborative, as well as the SBDC, the Central Virginia Small Business Development Center. All these organizations are doing so much here in the community for the entrepreneur ecosystem. And then we are sponsored by the Batten Institute as well at UVA. And so just to go ahead and get started, the structure of the event is we have the two speakers, then we do announcements, which you can be thinking about if there's any upcoming events or if your company is hiring. We talk about those two things. And then we actually end with breakout rooms. So as the speakers are talking, we will have the opportunity to give input and a Q&A for the crash and learn speaker, but we also put them into breakout rooms at the end, which would simulate a live event where you can go up and talk to the speaker after. So it's kind of like that. You can go talk to them after. And so I'll kind of manage the time as well. So if you run out of things to say or run out of time, you can always chat with them a little bit more after. So we can jump in. The fun fact about today is both of our speakers' name is Allison, but we love the female entrepreneurs. And so we are very excited to hear from both, but we're going to start with Allison Wickham, and in the breakout rooms, we'll call them Allison W and Allison E. So creative. But Allison Wickham is just a little bit about her. She's actually she's from Virginia. She's from Powhatan specifically, and grew up like myself in the horse industry, around horses, and went to JMU. So she studied chemistry, environmental studies, and geography at JMU. And then she moved to Hawaii. Who doesn't want to move to Hawaii? To be a beach bum. And was able to do that for a while. And that's actually where she was introduced to beekeeping, believe it or not. So after that, she fell in love with the concept of beekeeping and moved to Colorado to study agriculture at Colorado State. And then she was able to work for the country's largest milk wholesaler. And then she, for whatever reason, switched to a government job and did not last long. That was not where her heart was. So she came back to Virginia and was an ad consultant for a while. And then unfortunately, due to COVID, lost her job, and that was the perfect opportunity for her to start a pollinator company. So that is exactly what her company does. She's Siller Pollinator Company, and she is doing this full time. And just a fun fact to throw out there, she's been an entrepreneur her whole life. She had a business selling salamanders that she found in the rocks when she was a kid. And she had 2 customers, which were both her teachers. So, and then she, again, refound her passion for entrepreneurship later in life. So let's go ahead and hand the mic over to Allison Wickham.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can.
Good. I'm in my truck because right now I don't have an office yet. That starts October 1st. And I have to go straight to an appointment after this. So if anybody has any trouble like hearing me or seeing me or anything, just let me know and I can try to make some adjustments. I'm truly just like very early stage, literally driving around everywhere, flying by the seat of my pants. So yeah, sorry about the truck background.
You were good. We don't expect you to have an office as a bee pollinator, so it's all good.
Yeah, that is true. I guess it is nice that I'm even going to have an office on October 1st.
Yeah,
that's pretty exciting. It's growth, so I'm very excited about that. Yeah, that was a great intro. Thank you. And I actually started this business in 2019, and it was just this sort of almost like a joke. I was, standing. We moved back to Virginia from Colorado. We had a rental house briefly, and I was just standing in the rental house. And I remember I was like eating some Cheez-Its, and I was thinking out loud and said, I wonder if somebody would pay me to take care of their bees. And that, it was a joke. And then I just started the business, and it was a hobby, and I did a little bit of advertising. And it was unbelievable. I mean, the response that people had was crazy to this idea. And immediately my phone starts ringing off the hook. And I'm like, I can't believe this. This is nuts. So, COVID, very long story as to why I lost my sort of day job. That was, it was really secure, and it's nice to have benefits and a steady paycheck and that security. And it was hard. I always wanted to do something on my own and start my own business, but it was really hard to leave that security. But luckily I got kicked out of that security, which, in April of 2020, when I lost my job, nobody was hiring, nobody was doing anything. So I pretty much had to pour myself completely into my little hobby fledgling joke idea business, and it has really grown substantially. In 2019 I had 1 client, and I think right now I've got 79. And I had one hive that I was managing in 2019, and now I'm up to 200. I've got several like large pollinator habitat install projects going on. I'm working with a lot of nonprofits in the area. I just made my first hire. She started last week. Yeah, I'm paying my mortgage doing this, so that's always nice. And yeah, that's kind of the brief synopsis. The company mission is to help people help pollinators. So whatever that may look like, it looks like all different types of things. And most of the clients are interested in honeybees specifically and want to either have honeybees for honey production or for tax reasons, because honeybees are considered livestock by the state, so they're qualifying. They can help you to qualify if you're like a larger landowner for tax breaks for land use. And some people just love bees and just want bees. Some people want to be beekeepers, and I'm actively always engaging in them and training them. I'm like their personal trainer, but for beekeeping. Some people just want the bees on the farm as part of their vegetable production system, or what have you. And yeah, you know, there's also all different types of pollinator projects that go on, whether it's having a group of high school kids and we come out, we learn about native pollinators, or maybe it's helping somebody put in a pollinator garden. Tomorrow, I'm going to help somebody identify all of the plants in their yard to figure out which ones they want to keep and which ones they want to take out and replace with pollinator, you know, pollinator friendly gardening. Today, I have a site visit and I'm going to K-Tech, where I have 2 hives that are there to produce honey for the culinary, I guess, program. The kids that do the culinary program there at K-Tech, you know, the idea is that we're hopefully going to make some honey that they can learn about honey production and incorporate that honey into what they do. So that's kind of a cool sort of farm to table loop within the school. It's a really nice pollinator education piece. So it's really diverse, and I spend my whole day in the truck. I travel from Culpeper to the north down to like Dinwiddie in the south, east of Richmond, Charles City line, out to Harrisonburg. So that's kind of my current range. Yeah, so that pretty much is the company in a nutshell. I don't know if anybody has any questions, or Hope if you want to send me in another direction on anything.
Yeah, that's amazing, by the way. And I had no idea you had 79 clients. What did you have an ask? I know we had talked about something you wanted to get advice on, so we can start there.
Yeah, I think the biggest struggle for me as a business owner has been charging the right price. We could probably go into a very long-winded conversation about why, but it's my instinct to undervalue the service and over deliver, which I think makes my customers really happy. But I do feel like there probably is a bigger profit margin, and it's me that's holding myself back from that. I've even had several clients tell me, like, you really need to charge more. But I have a very hard time doing that because I want the service to be approachable. And it kind of seems like the answer is simple, but it's really the action of charging more for the service is not as simple. I haven't been able to do it. There's something blocking me, whether it's, you know, psychological, or what is it? Like, what is it that's preventing me from pulling the trigger on increasing the prices to be, I mean, I am paying myself, and I am making a profit, and I am able to pay my bills. But am I preventing growth of this company because I'm not where I need to be with pricing? And if I was where I need to be with pricing, would my company and myself be in a better position? Would I be excluding certain people and therefore losing and or not having potential clients, you know, that I would have if the price point was lower? So that's kind of been, honestly, really my only struggle, is just kind of wrapping my mind around that concept. So
can you give
yeah,
any
I guess,
insight into where you are relative to the market or industry, or how you've come to the pricing you've gotten, or anything like that? And then we can open up the floor for feedback.
yeah, that's a great question. There really aren't that many companies to compare myself to. Truly, with the exact list of services, I haven't found another company exactly like mine anywhere in the country. But there are a couple of companies that offer some of the same services, and there's even a couple companies in Virginia that offer somewhat similar services. Interestingly, there's another company like mine that, you know, I kind of feel like we must either be having the same ideas at the same time, or like when I start a new service, it seems like they start the same service. And it's almost always double what I'm charging. Now, granted, that company's based in Northern Virginia. That probably doesn't have anything to do with anything, but yeah. And you know, there's a couple other similar companies that I think are probably 150% of where I'm at, that are maybe Boston based, or there's a Philadelphia based company that, you know, if I'm charging 500 for something, they're charging 750 for it. Yeah, so hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, yeah, definitely. All right, I'm gonna take you off spotlight view here. Okay, so you guys can do gallery view or whatever. All right, so Allison, her ask is around pricing. So would love some feedback. We can open up the floor to what thoughts you all have for her. And it's a small group, so you can just unmute and talk if you want.
I'll jump in, the other Allison. Well, for what it's worth, I have heard over and over again that a lot of small business startups, and women in particular, tend to undercharge. It's a combination of getting started and, to your point, making it affordable so that that's not a barrier to people wanting to sign you on. But also, you know, kind of making sure that you, like you said, that you're delivering on the service that you promised, and making sure that they don't come back to you saying it's not worth it, right? So for what it's worth, that's not a unique situation, so you shouldn't feel, you know, too bad about that. One thought process, you know, not knowing your business exactly, is for you to kind of go back and look at the history of which clients you acquired and when you acquired them, and what their own specific situation is, and determine whether you want to take a group of your current clients and grandfather them into a certain price point. If you have other clients who maybe are current clients, but who could afford to pay you more, then you know, start a slow increase for them. Because I have found it as my own self, you know, and I fight up against big brands, and we find sometimes our clients will give us, not ask for as big of a discount from us as the big guys, because they know we need the extra revenue. So there is a certain part of that could work to your favor. And then any of your new clients, that's where you kind of you start them at the higher price point. So that way you don't have that kind of guilt factor, if you will, of all of a sudden jacking your prices to the ones who helped you get started. But I think you also have to have that conversation with them, that that's what your plan is for new clients, and that you still need to increase them as well, so that you're slowly bringing them along to market price. And I would get your market research from Boston, Northern Virginia, whatever, show where the rest of the competitors around the country, what they are charging, so that people understand that you are providing a valuable service.
Yeah, that's great. That's totally, yeah, that's something I've thought about too. And that something, one thing that I really love is transparency on pricing. You know, let's say I'm going to book a wedding venue. I want to know, how much is it, before I even, you know, pick up the phone. At least that's something that I personally value so much, is knowing at least an estimate of what I'm going to pay before I even engage with a company. And, you know, maybe I need to like let go of that, and that's inappropriate, and I need to pull like pricing off the website, you know. And several people have sort of offered up like a sliding scale as an option, but I've struggled with that because of like transparency and pricing. So that's something too. I'm nervous about kind of having some people paying $700 for a service and some people paying $500 for service. But maybe I could do it just sort of in the form of discounts, as like, thank you for helping me get started. Here's your forever 20% off kind of thing.
Awesome.
Allison, I would add, you also have the option of a couple things. One is you can let clients know you're going to have to raise rates. So like the next annual billing, or the next, you know, some point in the future, it'll go up, so that there's some warning, and you can get feedback from them of like, you can even see their face of like what their reaction is when that happens.
Right.
Or additional services that they might have you go to your future rate on that when they add a service, but you may grandfather in permanently, like their original one, with some level of increasability.
Right.
And then as your profit margin is probably fine for now, but if you add people who are doing what you do, you've got to pay for them too, and then keep
Right.
some margin for yourself. So that's where like the future ones, I would think, you'll have to start there of raising, like every new client is like the other Allison said, a little bit higher. And then, like I said, either grandfather in or let them know a really long way in advance so that rates will be going up in a year or 6 months or whatever the number is that you're comfortable with.
Right. Yep. That's a great idea.
I know Jason had a comment.
Hey, Allison. I just
Hey, Jason.
just dropped.
I saw you on the list.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I just dropped the kids off, so I'm also in the car. But I have a thought, and just a provocative thought, and that is, well, don't change your rates at all. I mean, I'm not just saying that because I'm a customer, but I also think that where you're leaving a lot of money on the table is in not selling all the value add, like selling nukes or selling clothing or selling queens, because you have so many hives under management. I mean, that's where all the money is. That's where all the value add is, and selling all these supplies. And unfortunately, all of your billing right now is directly correlated with the amount of time that you personally spend. There's no way for you, and I don't know how much. I mean, sure, you could raise the hourly rate a little, but I think selling queens for $35 or $40 each and selling nukes for $125 or $150 delivered. I mean, these are things that with 200 hives, you should be able to easily accomplish. And then the other thought is you could also, for people who want a fixed price, maybe just charge, say, $200 a year or $250 a year, whatever it is, to just manage a hive, no matter what you need to do or when you need to come out or otherwise. And if you're producing the queens and you have the nukes and otherwise, then presumably your costs aren't $35 or $40 a queen. It's maybe cents on the dollar. But anyway, that's what I would do, is be a full turnkey. And also they had the Beehive program that just resumed in the Commonwealth. So you could probably get a hold of all the names of people who were selected for hives and reach out to them, and you can be the one who sells them the frames and the materials. Yeah. But anyway, I don't know what your relationship is with Scottsville Supply Company, and it's a wonderful store for anyone who hasn't been there. You should definitely visit. But for sure, unless you're getting you send a lot of business to them, and I don't know if maybe that's another thought, is to get some revenue share on the business you send to them. Yeah. I'm that's such an interesting point with the relationship with Scottsville Supply Company. It's tough because I really love and support that business, and the obvious choice is for me to start retailing more beekeeping supplies. Traditionally, I've sent people their way because I see myself as like more service-based, whereas they are definitely just more retail-based. We share a community, we share a common goal, and I have been hesitant to start retailing equipment because of becoming a direct competitor of theirs. So, yeah, I haven't really pushed into that space too much, just because of that, not wanting to become a competitor. But I think, with bees, it makes sense because they always run out of bees. They always sell out of bees. The fact that people can call them and say, I want to buy some bees, and they say, we're out, but call Allison, that is something that, is a very easy, I should be doing more of that. That's a great suggestion. Yeah, especially since on the equipment, you might figure how much people spend. I mean, just getting started with bees, I mean, it could be $1,000 or more in just materials, Well, if you're doing a typical retail markup, I mean, that's $500 that you're leaving on the table right there. You're probably leaving on the table almost as much as you charge in services. So you could probably, but again, this is, I go through this with students. There's something called Porter's 5 Forces. So you got to figure all this out, the substitution costs, and also what happens if you're competing with Scottsville and maybe they're not sending you business. But anyway, it's probably worth a conversation with them regardless.
Okay.
And maybe there's a way you guys can both share in the profit.
Yeah.
The margins.
Yeah. That's a great suggestion. I've been meaning to go in because that business just changed ownership.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it did. So there's a new owner. Heather, who was a really good personal friend of mine, just sold it. So now I need to go and sort of reestablish a relationship there. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect timing. All right. Thanks, Hope.
Thank you.
Hey, this is James. Allison, I have a couple thoughts and questions as well. I'm a newer business and struggled too with pricing and trying to make sure I'm not overcharging, but wanting to make sure that I keep that I grow and that I keep clients on. And it's been hard to, and I think there's some psychological components to this. And so I wonder if some of that is there too. Like am I really worth this? Like, having this psychological piece. And then thinking about what is fair profit. And so some of that maybe you need to, there are ways maybe to overcome that in trying to understand that, the market can determine those things. And if people are willing to pay it, then it's okay to have extra margin. It's okay to do that because you are growing and you may need to put some of that aside for future hires, for reinvesting into the company. Things like that. But I wondered about your different client types, if you could bucket them, because it sounds like you might have some that are more commercial and they're for profit. You might have some that are just small, like my folks have a couple hives and they're, they don't really know what they're doing. They're part of a different, clubs and things like that, but they may be a smaller type of, so thinking about client types, thinking about, if the markets can take it, I think you should charge more and start thinking about reinvesting that, putting that money aside for your growth, your new employee, and getting over some of the fear part. For me, it's like fear of loss. If I charge too much, will people leave or never, or not start business with me? And then part of it too, I think, is giving back, which you already are doing. So I think, for me, I look at how can I help nonprofits, or, one of our core values is generosity. And so looking at education and ways that I can give back, and the margin will allow me to do that. So I think there are ways to overcome maybe some psychological barriers. You were talking about barriers to pricing in that, I'm setting aside some for growth, for future growth, to sustain my business. And then also, where can I give back? Where can I maybe offer discounts in a way that helps a nonprofit or helps a smaller business? And then even for-profit customers maybe look at tying it into over time, so starting here, and then we would scale that up over time as you continue to grow and as you have more profit. There could be a way to do that as well. So those were a couple thoughts I had.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And that's something, the fair margin piece is something that's a really valuable thought to me, because it's numbers and it's math, right? So if I can say, okay, let's, whatever it is, let's say 30%, I feel like it's fair. Then I can work my way mathematically backwards. And I have a very good grasp on my expenses and how the business could be leaner, how I could drive my expenses down. I know exactly how much everything's costing me. And so then I just need to go up, by 40% or whatever, right? That's simple. Like I said, sometimes the answer seems simple, and it's just like the action behind to execute it is just so hard to call the client and say, I'm going to have to go up from 500 to 670. And it's just very difficult conversation for me to have.
My business partner that I work with has told me that the client that pays 500 will probably pay will probably pay 680. You know, the client that pays, you know, 5,000 will pay 5,880. You know, that, you know,
Right.
so we'll, you know, they're probably not going to, if they're not going to balk at the 500, the 680 is probably going to work. And, you know, so
Right.
I think you know, there is probably the opportunity there without losing that client.
For sure.
So this is such a great question, Allison, and I think there's probably still a lot of good ideas for you, and especially on the mental side of it. And I'm a business owner too, and so I get some of the things that you're saying. So definitely we'll have you in a breakout room after. So if you have more ideas for Allison, more anecdotes, whatever, please do jump in her breakout room afterwards. And if Allison, if you want to stick I know you're not driving. So if you want to put your email address and phone number, whatever website in the chat, people can also get in touch with you with ideas.
Okay.
So,
Perfect.
all right. Well, we will transition. Thank you very much, Allison. We're going to transition to the other Allison. This is actually, I apologize. I never asked how to properly say your last name, how to pronounce it.
That's okay. It's Evanow, like Kavanaugh.
Okay. Evanow. So Allison Evanow, a little bit about her. So she went to UVA. So Charlottesville, Wahoo, went to UVA, and then went to Thunderbird School for her MBA. And I think a fun fact is she met her husband at Thunderbird, but he also had went to UVA. So kind of cool that they followed the same path without really knowing each other, but that was some common ground that they had at Thunderbird. And she worked for several beverage brands from Pepsi to Jose Cuervo, and actually ended up starting her own so Square One Organic Spirits is her company, but it was one of the first all organic spirits companies. And she was also one of the first women to start a spirits brand. She started this back in 2004 and actually grew that company in California for 14 years. She lived in California and grew the brand there, and then relocated to Charlottesville. Her and her husband needed to pick somewhere on the East Coast to be. So of course they picked Charlottesville. And so she came back, and this is now where she has her roots. So she's kind of a new entrepreneur back here and really getting involved in the community more and continuing to grow her brand. Just some fascinating stories, just being a female in this space. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing what Allison has to say. She also mentors other women in this space, and just doing some huge things. So I would love to hand the mic over to Allison Evanow.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that. Good morning, everybody. I think it's hard when you've been in business as long as I've been to actually pick a topic to talk about today. And after talking to Hope about some of our trajectory over the years, I thought I would talk about money, right? Because when you're an entrepreneur, and in particular in my case, leaning more heavily towards a solopreneur, I do not have a working co-founder. It's an interesting study in finance to figure out how to finance and grow your business, as you move along the path of entrepreneurship. So I will tell a little bit about my backstory, but I thought part of today I would just share some of the inflection points and, let's say, the decision tree of whether to raise money, when to raise money, how to manage the financial part of the business, because I do feel like we don't really fit the mold, which is kind of the way we roll anyway. So to follow up on Hope's intro, when I started Square One, I did come from the wine, spirits, and regular beverage industry. So I definitely had industry experience, but we were the first all organic spirits company in the whole United States. And early on in particular, there was a lot of head scratching about why it mattered to be organic in distilled spirits. For any of you who know just even an inkling about distilled spirits versus, say, beer or wine, the actual process of distillation cleans up your product. if you will. So in theory, if you had herbicides, pesticides, and all of that on your raw materials, it technically wouldn't matter in the end product. So there was a lot of head scratching as to why it really mattered in spirits to be organic. And so early on, part of our ethos and part of our education of our brand and why it mattered was an environmental one, more about how we treat the land, how we treat the work hands, the farmers who farmed the products or the raw materials, and also just the overall sense that when you go organic, you can't cheat. You can't put a lot of things in your products that big spirits companies are known for doing, which is hiding from the consumer some not so great ingredients and maybe some of the things that they do. So that was the ethos behind Square One. It was to use all organic grains and botanical infusions. And so that's how we got our start. So from a decision tree point of view, financially, one of the things that we faced at the beginning writing the business plan was, do we try to raise money right out of the gate, or do we show proof of concept? So I'm going to kind of hit a couple different points along the way of the decisions that we made throughout our history. And it just kind of provides a really interesting timeline, I think, for decisions on, financing or not from inside or outside. So the first step was, do we go out and raise? And we wrote the original business plan thinking we were going to raise. And then when we started speaking to a lot of folks inside the industry, that skepticism I mentioned at the beginning was still so present that we didn't feel we would probably easily be able to raise. It also happened to be at a time where we were very much ahead of our time, not just being organic and being the first organic, not just being one of the first women in a very, very male-dominated industry to start a spirits company without her husband, which a lot of people assumed automatically that my husband was my business partner, and he in fact was not. In fact, my sister, who lives in Richmond, she's a senior vice president of risk management at Citizens Bank. She's my backer, right? So she owns about 30% of the company, but she has a day job in banking, so she's not an active co-founder. So early on, we decided, okay, we're going to have to prove it. So decision point number one, raise before we actually launch on concept alone. The answer was, we don't think we're going to find the money. The market didn't exist for that kind of capital at the time. We were very much ahead of our time in terms of the capital market. So we said, bootstrap it. Mortgaged our homes, both of us, put our equity from our homes. I lived in California at the time, and thankfully my equity was pretty fat because California home prices are pretty high. So we were able to bootstrap at that point to get started. So then fast forward a couple years, we have tremendous traction for a very small company. We got tons and tons of PR, whether it was from Newsweek, Time, Forbes, consumer articles about organic, Green Living magazines, things like that. We had gotten a lot of press. We had gotten a lot of big national accounts immediately for in the on-premise, what we call on-premise, which is the hospitality channel. And so we felt, wow, okay, we've proven the point. It's time to raise. So we started that path about 2 years in. We found that we were still too early. We were perhaps not too early from the concept. There started to be a lot of belief that organic was going to find its way into pretty much every consumable category. So it was less about the product and it was more about the capital market. And, being that we were in the Bay Area, we were in Marin County, everything was focused on tech. So a lot of the investment scenarios were so skewed to tech. Consumer packaged goods were hard, spirits even harder. So we went after the natural products community, thinking that being organic, and that particular investor would understand and agree with being organic, we would go after that particular segment of the investor market to try to raise money. And what we found was that there were still very, very few CPG and natural products investment. Now, today is huge, but back then it was very, very small. But most importantly, we found that the people who were in the natural products organic investment space were purists. And they had a real psychological mental block with supporting beverage alcohol. Because let's face it, if you do not treat beverage alcohol in the proper way in terms of the consumption, it's not a good thing. So there was kind of a little bit of a puritanical, I have a problem investing in alcohol kind of a problem with the natural products investment community. So we really had a hard time securing any real traction with potential investors. So by now we're kind of in year 4, year 5, we're rocking and rolling. We're growing 20 or 3 digit number growth, and multiple revenues. We had already hit $1 million in 2008 after just a couple years in the market. Still did not have any of our own salespeople. It was all through distributors, through broker networks, a very, very small, lean team at home. But it does require a lot of investment in marketing in our industry. And I do want to make note that specifically to our industry, we generally speaking, if your plan is to ultimately exit, which it is our plan, you don't need to have a positive EBITDA to sell. You are sold on your top line revenue growth and your gross margin and your cash flow, much more so than your EBITDA. So our goal was to grow top line revenue more than the bottom line. But then I had to manage the bottom line to make sure I could stay in business. That was probably the most challenging part. So coming through after realizing that we had to continue to bootstrap it, wait for the market to catch up as far as not just the consumer that was still growing, but especially the investor community. We were ready to go out, and then the market crashed, right? 2008, 9, 10, whatever. I'm using personal stock from our savings to fund the business, and I didn't have enough money to fund the business. So we had to super batten down the hatches, tighten everything up. And fortunately, because the whole market contracted, it wasn't really held against us, if you will, that we had significantly contracted our marketing spend, our trade support to our distributors, et cetera. So, we got through flat, and everybody said, if you got through 07, 08, 09 flat, then you were ahead of the curve. So we got through the crisis with flat, maybe single digit growth. And we came out of the back end in 2010 with back to double digit growth. And so that's when we thought, okay, time to raise. And what was happening was then the market started to change, both on the consumer side. Organics was becoming more important. We now had competitors, and some were from very big companies, some were from smaller companies. And we thought this is the right time to go out to the market, because there are people now investing in craft spirits, which is what we were. It will be a good time to go. Went back to the market, and the feedback was, oh yeah, we're investing in craft spirits, but we're investing in physical distilleries. And I didn't have my own distillery. I was a contract producer, if you will, with a distillery partner. So all of the money that was going into craft spirits was going into all the physical distilleries across the country. So there was not as much of an opportunity there. So once again, keep going, keep growing, keep funding, keep fueling, putting more money in to continue to grow the business. Fortunately, again, we are continuing to grow. And so we didn't feel trapped or anything like that, which was great. Then in 2013 and 2016 is when we had, as Hope referenced, the personal change in life. My husband worked in high tech for Salesforce.com. He was a top level sales executive, and he was offered a position to start a new vertical in higher education, the higher education sales vertical in the East. And so we had to pick up and move to the East. It was too good of an opportunity. I already lived on an airplane, so it didn't really matter where we lived. Because I didn't own my own distillery, it didn't matter where we lived. So it actually made it relatively easy. But as I'm sure all of you can appreciate, when you are a solopreneur and you have some personal disruption in your life, you can't exactly run a company, move your family across the country, and raise money at the same time. So 2013 to 2016, it didn't matter what was happening in the market. There was no way for us to raise. So we kept going, we kept growing. And in 2015, we were discovered by the folks that go out on behalf of Oprah Winfrey, and find her favorite things for her big holiday promotions. And they found us, and she fell in love with our whole product line. We by now had 5 spirits, our straight organic rye vodka and 4 botanically infused organic vodkas. And she wanted to highlight all of them, which was fantastic. So we got a really big boost in 2015 and 16 from the Oprah program. And we thought, time to go out, right, to the market and raise capital, because now we're at our peak. And so we did. We went to the market, we talked to the market, and basically, again, the feedback was, this is great. You pioneered it. You've done an amazing job, but the goalposts have changed. And now, to raise capital, or more importantly, what we really wanted to do was to partner with a strategic. By this time, we didn't really want to raise our own money. We wanted to partner with a strategic in the space. And fortunately, a lot of the strategics by now had created their own incubators. They had their in-house VC, if you will, their own venture teams and M&A teams, and they would invest in your company and help you a little bit. It was mostly money more than help to grow, with the idea that they would potentially then acquire you. And the feedback we got then was, well, now when we want to partner with somebody, we either want you to be brand spanking new, which we no longer were, we're now a 10, 11-year-old company, or we want you to be huge. And we were neither. And so the market feedback then was, you're not big enough. You're either too big or you're not big enough. So we were, as one of my advisors, she's in agriculture, CPG, M&A, Cascadia Capital, based out west. She said, we call you a tweener. You're a tweener, and you don't really fit where a lot of investment communities want to invest. So you're going to have to go out and raise capital on your own. You're not going to be able to partner with a strategic because you don't fit what they're looking for on either end. And that's when we started our capital raise, 10, 11, 12 years now more into the company. So in 2017 is when we went and looked at the community, investment community, decided we had to raise our own money. And so in 2018 is when I spent my time saying, okay, now what, right? What does this look like? The market, the consumer, the good thing is the consumer in organics had arrived. They were definitely open to organics in multiple categories. We were no longer a head scratcher as far as organic alcohol. People bought into the benefit of organics in the agricultural system, even if the end product was in beverage alcohol. So the good news is the consumer was there. The good news is the investment community had grown a ton. And so there were more opportunities. And so we just had to figure out how to do that. Well, if you go back through our history, the only way we were really able to bootstrap the company, as long as I did, was we stayed very narrowly focused on the hospitality channel. So I had national placements on cocktail menus with Morton Steakhouse, with J. Alexander Steakhouse, with Bonefish Grill for about 3 years running, with Carrabba's Italian, whatever its name is. We had a lot of wonderful national accounts on the on-premise, a lot of wonderful independent restaurants, hotels, et cetera, and a smattering of retail across the country. But we knew in order to scale, we had to go retail. And so in our research in 2018, we realized that the spirits alone were not going to achieve that. We are a luxury price product. We are in the $30 range. And so therefore, you don't have the numbers on just the spirits alone to scale significantly as an independent brand. So that's when I went back to my days of working for Jose Cuervo. I actually worked for the family, the Mexican family that's had it since 1755. It's been in the family for that long. And I went back and I realized that one of the most successful programs we ever did on the brand was when they came out with a margarita mix. Because when you merchandise at retail, tequila and margarita mix together, you not only get the incremental value of the sale of the margarita mix, you also sell 30-something% more tequila, which our merchandising studies showed. And the retailer's happy because somebody's walking out of that store with an extra item in their basket that they probably didn't come to purchase. So taking a page out of the Cuervo book, making it a little higher end, we made the decision to launch a line of non-alcoholic organic cocktail mixers. And shockingly, we are the broadest line with 5 products in organics, because once again, being organic is not easy. A lot of companies won't commit to organic. We do, that's what we do. So we came out with that offering for retail, to partner with our spirits and help pull our spirits out of just hospitality into retail. And then at the same time is when the whole canned everything craze started, whether it was the seltzers or whether it was the cocktails or whether it was wine in a can. And our distributor said, you can't not be in this category, right? This is a very hot category. You're one of the few organic spirits companies that is national, not regional, and you need to be in this category. And so we thought, oh my God, how am I going to do 2 product lines at the same time? But we did. So we developed at the same time that we were developing in 2018, 19, our mixers. We also were developing the ready to drink at the same time that I was closing down my California office, relocating from a legal point of view from being a California LLC to a Virginia LLC, even though I'd already lived here for a couple years. Basically knew that the team I had in California was not going to be the team to move me forward. So completely reorged everybody out very slowly, very gently, and very happily for everybody, I might say, and ended up hiring a COO who in effect is my right-hand person, knowing that the 2 of us had to kind of push everything forward and at some point be ready to raise. So we launched in the midst of a pandemic, which a lot of people would say, oh my God, how did you do that? And I thought, oh my God, how lucky did I get? Because most of my business was still in the hospitality channel. And I wouldn't probably be talking to you today if all I had were spirits, because we had 80% of our sales were in the hospitality channel. So we got hammered on the spirit side, but we made up for it and grew 40% by having 2 retail product lines. So fast forward all that history, and here we are in 2021. And after 17 years in business, we are at the very tail end of our capital raise. What's been interesting about this process has been 2 things. Number 1, we are WeBank certified, which means we are a women-owned certified business. There are a lot of opportunities right now for any minority-owned business who can prove that they are owned majority and controlled by either a woman or a minority, and you are certified. So it is very important for us to take advantage of those opportunities. I'm not gonna walk away from that if I have a chance to get into United Airlines, which I do right now. Those types of things are important. But what that meant was when I went out to raise, guess what? I needed a lot of women on my cap table to make sure I could stay certified. That is hard. There's not a lot of money out there coming from women in control. There may be women investors, independent angels. There are a few venture capital funds that are strictly women owned and or women funded and women deployed to women businesses. But it's hard to keep your cap table clean from the standpoint of the certifying body to stay female owned. So we are very happy that, knock on wood, all the final due diligence and decisions will be made probably in the next 10 days from 2 major, one is the largest women's angel funding group in the country called Golden Seeds out of New York City. And the other one is a Detroit-based women's VC fund called Bell Impact Fund. Those 2 are the leads to come in and start the round. And then we have a lot of other folks behind it, whether it's smaller VCs or angels who are going to come in and hopefully close the round. What's had to happen though, is we're raising less money than we ultimately will need, because again, we need to stay certified. So when you look at the kind of whole 17-year history of decision tree of whether we want to raise, can we raise, or are things getting in the way of the raise, like the couple years where I had personal transitions and there's no way I could handle doing all of that, to today, it's been a very interesting journey. And it's been fascinating because I think a lot of the really good feedback we've gotten during this raise is, wow, you've bootstrapped a company for 17 years. Who does that? And now the market's ready, the consumer's there, all of the opportunities, you have a product line that can scale at retail. So, giddy up, let's go. And we're saying, yeah, let's giddy up, but let's not lose sight of the fact that we have the certification to take care of. And so let's raise one tranche early and then another tranche later, which is not how a lot of people do it today. A lot of people go out and raise a ton of money all at once and kind of go out there and hit the market hard. We figure we've been in the market long enough that we can tranche it. And that's kind of where we are today. So I just thought it would be an interesting journey. Hope told me that you guys tend to like storytelling of how people have gone along their entrepreneurial journey. And that's kind of how we've been going along. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens when I finally take the money, change the cap table, and we're off to the races.
Absolutely amazing story, Allison. Take your spotlight off too. Yeah, I just the progression of your story as well. Very well done. And wild ride you've had, and very patient.
Yes.
And faithful to your brands for sure. I would love to open up the floor for questions. I'm sure people have them. You guys can hit gallery view if you want. I took the spotlight off, but yeah, who has some questions for Allison? Anybody? I'm sure people have questions. I have a question. When they told you to go into the cans, to open up that, I guess you consider that a product line as well, that
Yes.
vertical.
Yes.
Was it really just like, okay, or how much resistance did you give to that in light of the fact that you already knew you were opening it up to mixers as well?
Yeah.
Like, was that really hard?
I did have a lot of resistance. One of the reasons was that the benefit of there are two main benefits of the cocktail mixers, commercially speaking. This is somewhat, one of them is consumer facing and one of them is more commercial leverage. So from a consumer facing point of view, the reason we did the mixers, we started as a brand that was all about everything's from scratch. Everything is fresh. You're squeezing your own lemons, you're squeezing your own limes, you're, making your own simple syrup or whatever. And it was very, very geared towards what we called culinary cocktails. So much as a chef would make everything completely from scratch, that was really our ethos, particularly as a bar brand, as a hospitality brand. But what happened over the years is that when we would do consumer events, tastings and things like that across the country, we would pre-batch everything before, and consumers thought that that was for sale, right? They thought our mixers were for sale, and they weren't. And they kept saying, I love your stuff. I want to make cocktails at home that are like this, but I really don't want to do absolutely everything from scratch. I don't, especially if I'm having more than two other couples over, where I have to squeeze everything myself. And but I really, if I'm going to go out of my way to buy an organic vodka, why am I going to buy a conventional, mixer? And in fact, most of the cocktail mixers then, and still to this day, are very high sugar, mostly fake sugar or high fructose corn syrup, very low juice. They use a lot of flavorings to get their flavor instead of the juice itself. And so we saw an opportunity to bring that to the consumer, to go together and be sold together with our spirits. So the benefit was for the consumer, and the benefit was for us commercially to bundle them together. That also provides us a lot of trade leverage with our distributor partners, because in the non-alcoholic space, you don't have nearly the barriers of promotion, bundling, pricing, discounting, all of the things that you can't do in alcohol, we can do in mixers, along with selling direct to consumer, which is a part of our channel as well. So when the cans came along, it's like, wow, you're messing things up, right? Because they don't really go together. They are a standalone. They are very much a total new line extension. But then the way we viewed it was, well, we've always been known as a brand that is a little bit more esoteric. Our cucumber vodka, for example, was the first cucumber vodka in the world. There's now maybe 30 of them. So, we are a trendsetter despite our small size. And we thought, well, we're not going to come out with a vodka soda. We're not going to come out with a Moscow Mule. because we know all the big companies are going to come out with the generic cocktails. So we thought, well, if we can bring more of a specialty cocktail in a can to you from our history as a specialty cocktail brand, then we will be attractive to those consumers who want something, you know, maybe a little bit different. And then at the same time, the thought process was, and I should have brought a box up here with me of our canned cocktails. On one panel of the box is the vodka we use in it. So we have a cocktail called the Cucumber Therapy, and it uses our cucumber vodka, ginger, rose, lemon, lime, I think. And on the side, there is a bottle of the cucumber vodka. And we have another one called Basil Berry Fizz, which is at Whole Foods in California, and Pair of Roses, which is also at Whole Foods in California. And the Pair of Roses has our botanical spirit on it, and the Basil Berry Fizz has our basil. So we decided to use the cans more as a way to promote the mother brand. Yes, incremental sales. Yes, it's a big part of our volume for our forecast, especially for investors, but simply that's because it's a higher velocity category to begin with. But really at the end of the day, what we really want to do is sell more spirits, because the margin, especially the absolute dollar margin on luxury price spirits, is pretty high. And so that's really where we want to drive people. So that's when I finally said, okay, let's not just do it as a standalone. Let's use it to promote the mother brand and get a younger consumer into the spirit franchise before they're really buying spirits on their own.
That's
And so
awesome.
it's definitely a launch pad.
And what made you decide not to have a partner along the way? I know you've referenced that you are still an entrepreneur. Was that something along the way you considered and didn't choose to do, or what?
It just didn't come about, I think I had a couple, folks early on who, and I did feel it was important that it was a female partner, simply because I knew that there were, we were going to leverage the fact that we were unique in terms of our ownership, because again, you had leftover fingers on one hand if you counted how many women started their business. But most of them were just either, if they had the industry experience, they just weren't in the entrepreneurial mindset. They weren't really ready to take the leap. So yeah, it just never presented itself. And I have to say, that's probably, looking back, one of the hardest things. Some people say it's great to not have a co-founder, because then you don't have to worry about ever getting, not getting along, and who's going to make the final decision when you're not in agreement. But I think at the end of the day, not having a co-founder to really be able to say, okay, I need to focus on this right now, whether it's a different business project, or in my case, a couple years of some personal transition in my family life, that didn't allow me to focus as much on some of the things that we needed to be able to grow. By not having that co-founder to get support from, and vice versa, I do feel makes it more challenging. But on the other hand, it's been nice to just not have to worry about disagreements or things that you might not agree with. I rely on my outside advisory team to really help be that co-founder, but ultimately I get to make the decision. So
That's awesome.
I have a question. I'm curious, what did your first sort of marketing campaign look like?
Yeah, it was really about, we have a tagline and we still own it to this day. When we first launched, we were very slow to roll out our spirits. So our first one, which is an all organic rye vodka, we buy all of our organic rye from farmers in Montana, and we distill it in Idaho. Our partner in Idaho was the first certified organic distillery in the whole country. And fortunately, their whole business model is to do custom production for clients. They don't have their own brand. So I kind of lucked out that they were already geared towards helping work with private entrepreneurial companies and had certified. So we have a tagline called "A Singular Spirit." It's a trademarked tagline. And so the whole idea behind a singular spirit was single origin, meaning all of our single grain, organic rye, single origin, Montana, singularly made in a quality point of view, and singular in the sense that we were the first. So really the whole campaign was kind of around first to market without saying first to market. So that was kind of really for the first 2 years when all we had was the straight vodka, was this concept of a singular spirit. We even had on our website back in the day, we had this whole series, a blog series, where we went out and we highlighted other people in different businesses and different communities that we felt embodied the singular spirit lifestyle. So for example, from a business point of view, we highlighted the brother sister founders of pretty much the first, I don't know if they were the first, but the first that made it national, organic tea company called Numi Organic Tea. And so, and Ahmed and Reem were immigrants from Iran who grew up in the United States, but they were immigrants. And it was a really incredible story as both immigrants and brother sister co-founders of an organic tea company. So, you know, we would highlight them, or we went out and we found somebody who was in the nonprofit space, who was really changing the game in particularly environmentalism. And we highlighted that person. So we did have this whole series called A Singular Spirit. And so that's really kind of what we focused on first, was not just the product, but the community who embodied the ethos of a singular spirit. That was how we got our first campaign started.
Hey, Allison, it's Jeremy. Along those lines, from a marketing perspective, how do you see your efforts split between like focusing on the end consumer versus focusing on a retailer specifically? Like, where are you trying to put your efforts?
That's such a great question. And it's one that comes up pretty much every time now when we're talking to new investors. We had historically been very focused on the bartender as our consumer. So when we first started, and actually more than first, for most of our history, all of our marketing in terms of real boots on the ground marketing was towards the bartender. We would participate in events like there's this big national conference called Tales of the Cocktail that's held every year in New Orleans, and all the bartenders come in from all over, not just the country, but the world. And we would host a lot of education events. I had a brand ambassador who was pretty well known in the cocktail community. He owned a bar in San Francisco. He was the first certified green bar in San Francisco, using all organic and green products and managing his whole bar in a certified green way in terms of, you know, energy and cleaning liquids and all that stuff. So he was kind of the face to the brand, to the bartending community as well. So our first consumer was really the bar more than anything. Now with 3 product lines, and now with the growth of organic in everything, we now can really talk to the consumer. And part of what this capital raise is about is not just that we have 3 new product lines. It's about the fact that, you know, we do have 3 different product lines. They do different things for the consumer. And one of the things we have to develop with the help of some smart marketing agencies is really, what is the new message going to be that still brings forth this concept of a singular spirit, because we are still very unique in what we do, but talk more directly to the consumer. So we haven't completely figured all of that out. That is actually part of the use of proceeds of our raise, is to work with a strategic marketing agency to better refine our messaging now that we're really going to the end user consumer, not the intermediary bartender.
Awesome. Do we probably have time for one more question? Does anyone else have a question for Allison?
So where is the facility you manufacture this, or the process?
We actually have 3 co-packers now that we have 3 product lines. Unfortunately, our distillery is not yet equipped to manage the can business. They will be, so they will hopefully be our manufacturer for anything with alcohol in it. So currently our manufacturer of the spirits is in Idaho. Our cocktail mixer manufacturer is in Northern California. They're actually one of the oldest organic juice companies in the country, family owned, and they produce all of our mixers. And then our canned cocktails are currently produced in Colorado. But again, the plan is to move to the distillery in Idaho. One of the interesting things is that because everything we do is certified organic, we can't just pick up and pick any co-packer. If the facility is actually not certified themselves, even if we come in with all organic ingredients, we can't get certified. So it's a very onerous process, but it provides a competitive advantage as well, because it's not as easy for people to just say, oh, I want to be organic and wave their magic wand and be organic. But it does make it a little harder sometimes to find the right partners.
So you have more work than that. Like you have to arrange all this production, then you have to arrange packing, then you have to arrange shipping, all those things, right?
Yes.
But you say you are a solopreneur. So I'm trying to understand how all these things come into picture when you have all these people working for you. I'm just new. I'm just trying to understand the concept, okay?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think my reference to solopreneur is really more from the ownership point of view and the decision maker point of view, right? I don't have a co-founder in the sense that we really are sharing the load at the ownership management level. I do have a COO now. That was actually part of the transition of transitioning out my team in California, which was more administrative and marketing oriented, not so much production oriented, because I was managing all the production and supply chain myself. But I knew once we moved into 2 new product lines, there was no way I could do that I had to transition my role more to business development and sales than kind of running everything. So I do have a COO. She does not have, a share in the company. I mean, obviously she will, have employee pool shares, but she is not an owner. So she's running all of our supply chain and packaging. And some of our partners actually really do it pretty turnkey. Our cocktail mixer company, the only thing we do is print labels. They do everything else. They buy the bottle, they buy the capsule, they schedule the runs. They're there physically during every run. So there's a fair chunk of it that's fairly turnkey. But my COO is really the one doing the heavy lifting. And then we have sales brokers and sales agents out in the market, but we don't have a direct sales force. And actually the new capital raise is to be able to add some of our own salespeople, because now that we have more product lines, we can't rely exclusively on our distributors for the sales efforts in order for us to scale.
Wow, Allison, again, thank you so much for sharing your story and just your journey. And like I said, she will be in a breakout room as well. If you have more thoughts for her, just want to get acquainted. And Allison, if you want to also put your contact information in the chat, that'd be awesome.